I was accused of stealing $200,000. The company director I trusted set me up to cover his schemes. While I fought to clear my name, he enjoyed life with the stolen money. But he made a mistake, he left me alive. The morning started like any other at Crawford and Mitchell Financial. I arrived early, as usual, the smell of fresh coffee wafting through the pristine halls of our downtown Chicago office. My corner workspace on the 32nd floor offered a view of Lake Michigan that still took my breath away, even after 5 years with the company. I was reviewing quarterly reports when 2 security officers appeared at my door. Their faces were grim, badges glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Alex Weber. We need you to come with us." My stomach dropped. In corporate finance, unexpected security visits never meant good news. I followed them down the hallway, past curious eyes peeking over cubicle walls, to the main conference room. Inside, 3 members of the board sat waiting. In front of them lay a stack of documents, spreadsheets I recognized from our internal system. My hands grew cold as I noticed the highlighted transactions. "Would you care to explain this transfer?" The head of security slid a paper across the polished mahogany table. $200,000, processed through your terminal last Thursday. I stared at the numbers, my world tilting sideways. The transaction looked legitimate at first glance, routing numbers, authentication codes, all the proper protocols followed. But I hadn't made that transfer. "This is impossible," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't authorize this. The logs show it was processed from your computer, using your credentials, during your regular hours." The security chief's voice was flat, unconvinced. The money was routed through 3 separate accounts before disappearing offshore. That's when it hit me. Last month's irregularities, the strange patterns I'd noticed in our international accounts. Robert Kingston, our CFO, had brushed off my concerns with his trademark smile and a friendly pat on the back. "You're overthinking it, Alex," he'd said, leaning against my desk with casual confidence. "These are standard operating procedures for our overseas subsidiaries. Focus on your domestic portfolios, you're doing great work there." Robert had been my mentor since I joined the firm. He'd taken me under his wing, invited me to family barbecues, even helped me secure my mortgage. His daughter and my son played on the same Little League team. I trusted him completely. But now, pieces were falling into place. The casual dismissals of my questions. The late nights he spent reviewing international accounts. The sudden renovation of his Lake Forest mansion. "I need to speak with Robert," I said, looking around the room. "He can verify." "Mr. Kingston is currently unavailable," one of the board members cut in. "He's attending a financial conference in Miami." Of course he was. The next few hours passed in a blur. My employment was terminated. Security escorted me to my desk, watched as I packed my personal items into a cardboard box. My phone buzzed constantly with text messages from colleagues, a mix of concern and barely concealed curiosity. As I stood in the elevator, clutching my box of belongings, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the polished doors. The man staring back at me looked shell-shocked, defeated. But somewhere behind the fear and confusion, a spark of determination flickered to life. Robert had made 3 critical mistakes. First, he'd gotten greedy. The amount he'd stolen was too large to hide forever, even with his elaborate shell game of offshore accounts. Second, he'd underestimated my attention to detail. During those months of brushing off my concerns, I'd quietly documented everything. Every suspicious transaction, every irregularity, every dismissive conversation. I hadn't known why at the time, it was just my natural inclination toward thoroughness. Now, those notes would become my roadmap. But his biggest mistake? He thought he'd broken me. He assumed that by taking my job, my reputation, my future, he'd left me with nothing to lose. He was wrong. When you strip everything away from someone, you give them the most dangerous thing of all, nothing left to fear. The next few weeks were brutal. The company's legal team moved fast, filing civil charges against me. My savings went to lawyers. My wife Lisa's face grew more strained each day as she watched our carefully built life crumble. The worst part was trying to explain to our 10-year-old son Tommy why he couldn't play baseball with Sarah Kingston anymore. But while Robert lounged by Miami pools and posted photos of yacht parties on Instagram, I was building my case. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Janet, a junior IT specialist I'd helped with her 401k planning last year. "I shouldn't be telling you this," she whispered during our secret meeting at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the office. "But something's wrong with the backup servers. Files are disappearing, old transaction records, mostly. Someone's trying to cover their tracks, but they're not as tech-savvy as they think." That was Robert's 4th mistake. In his rush to erase evidence, he'd forgotten about the cloud backups, the ones I'd insisted on implementing 2 years ago as part of our disaster recovery protocol. He'd voted against it at the time, calling it an unnecessary expense. I spent my days in a small home office, reconstructing timelines, cross-referencing data Janet secretly sent me. At night, I lay awake, remembering all the times Robert had played the role of mentor and friend. The Christmas party where he'd praised my potential to the board. The day he helped me pick out a birthday gift for Lisa at the same jewelry store where he bought his wife's anniversary presents. Each memory now felt like a carefully planted prop in his elaborate performance. The truth emerged slowly, like a photograph developing in darkroom chemicals. Robert hadn't just stolen $200,000, that was merely his attempt to frame me. The real scheme was much larger. Over 3 years, he'd embezzled nearly $4 million through a network of shell companies. The missing money was hidden in cryptocurrency wallets and offshore accounts, laundered through legitimate-looking international investments. I could have taken my evidence straight to the SEC. But that would have been too easy. Robert needed to feel what I felt, the slow, crushing weight of inevitable doom. The powerlessness of watching everything slip away while maintaining a brave face. So I began my own performance. First, I made sure word got back to him that I was broken. Through mutual acquaintances, I let slip that I was drinking heavily, that Lisa had taken Tommy to stay with her parents in Wisconsin. I posted desperate-sounding messages on LinkedIn about seeking employment opportunities. I wanted him to feel safe, to believe he'd won. Meanwhile, I created an anonymous email account and began sending small breadcrumbs of information to the company's largest shareholders. Nothing incriminating, just enough to raise questions about the international division's unusual profit margins. Robert's masterstroke had been hiding his theft behind complex foreign exchange transactions. Now, those same complexities would be his undoing. I also reached out to Sarah McCarthy, a reporter at the Chicago Tribune who'd covered white-collar crime for 15 years. We met in a parking garage straight out of All the President's Men, her idea, not mine. She listened to my story, reviewed my initial evidence. "If even half of what you're showing me is true," she said, "this isn't just embezzlement. This is systematic fraud that could bring down the whole executive team." "I don't want to bring down the company," I told her. "Just the man who corrupted it." She studied me for a long moment. "You know, most whistleblowers I deal with want immunity deals or book contracts. What do you want?" I thought about Robert's smile, about Tommy's tears when he lost his baseball friend, about Lisa's quiet strength as she held our family together. "I want justice," I said. "But I want him to know it came from me." Sarah published her first article 2 weeks later, a seemingly routine piece about regulatory challenges in international finance. Buried in the middle was a single paragraph about Crawford and Mitchell's unusually complex international transaction structure. The next day, the company's stock dropped 3%. Robert didn't notice. He was too busy planning his daughter's sweet 16 party, a lavish affair at the Chicago Yacht Club. I watched the preparations unfold through his wife's Instagram posts, each one tagged with #blessed. The party would cost more than my annual salary, my former salary, anyway. But the wheels were already in motion. Sarah's article caught the attention of a hedge fund manager known for shorting companies with suspicious accounting. He started asking questions. The board called an emergency meeting. Robert assured them everything was fine, but I knew his smile didn't reach his eyes that day. I kept my own face carefully neutral when Lisa told me she'd run into Robert's wife Margaret at the grocery store. She asked about you, Lisa said. Said Robert feels terrible about the whole thing, wishes it hadn't happened this way. I bet he did. The second article came out a month later. This time, Sarah had quotes from anonymous former employees about irregularities in the international division. The stock dropped 12%. Robert cancelled his family's planned Christmas vacation to Aspen. That's when he made his final mistake. In a panic, he tried to cover his tracks by doctoring old records. But in doing so, he accessed the same sealed files that had supposedly been used in my theft. The system logged his attempts, logs that Janet quietly copied and sent to me. I had him. The evidence went to the SEC in a detailed package: transaction records, access logs, bank statements, everything they needed to unravel his scheme. I included a timeline showing how he'd framed me to divert attention from his larger fraud. The day the FBI raided Crawford and Mitchell's offices, I was sitting in a coffee shop across the street. Agents in dark suits streamed into the building. Through the plate glass windows, I could see the confusion, the panic, the rapid spread of whispers across the trading floor. Robert was in a board meeting when they came for him. Later, employees would share videos of him being led out in handcuffs, his perfect suit wrinkled, his face ashen. He looked old suddenly, vulnerable. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. As they pushed him into the waiting SUV, his eyes met mine through the coffee shop window. The recognition hit him like a physical blow. I lifted my cup in a small salute, and watched the last of his composure crumble. The aftermath was everything I'd hoped for. The SEC investigation revealed the full scope of his fraud. Former colleagues called to apologize for doubting me. The company's insurance covered the stolen funds, and my lawyers negotiated a hefty settlement for wrongful termination. Robert took a plea deal, 15 years in federal prison, plus restitution. His assets were seized, the mansion sold, the offshore accounts frozen. His wife filed for divorce before he was even sentenced. I got my reputation back. A better job at a larger firm. A fresh start. But some nights, I still lie awake, thinking about the look in Robert's eyes when he realized what I'd done. Not just the fear or the shame, but something else, recognition. In that moment, he saw himself in me. The same patience, the same attention to detail, the same ability to play the long game. Sometimes I wonder if that's what revenge does, turns you into a mirror of the person who wronged you. Makes you learn to think like them, act like them, manipulate like them. The company's new CFO called me last week, offered me Robert's old job. "We need someone with your integrity," she said. I accepted. After all, I've learned a lot about corporate finance in the past year. About hidden accounts and complex transactions. About trust and betrayal and power. The view from Robert's old office is spectacular. On clear days, Lake Michigan stretches to the horizon, blue and limitless. Sometimes, when the sun hits the water just right, I can almost see my reflection in the glass. I try not to smile too widely during meetings. People might get the wrong idea. My son Tommy plays baseball again, but now on a different team. Sometimes during his games, I think about Sarah Kingston and wonder if she understands what really happened to her family. Their house was sold to a young tech executive, the garden where we had those summer barbecues now completely redesigned. I heard they moved to Cincinnati to live with Margaret's sister after the divorce. Last month, I received a letter from Robert. Prison mail, carefully screened and stamped. I recognized his handwriting, the same confident strokes that used to sign off on million-dollar transactions. Inside was a single sentence, "I should have known it would be you." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. But I keep the letter in my desk drawer, next to the family photo from last year's company Christmas party. In it, I'm standing at the podium, accepting my promotion to CFO, Lisa and Tommy beaming proudly from the front row. My smile in that photo is perfect, practiced, measured, confident. Just like Robert taught me.